Hi, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of Life Matters TV. I'm one of your hosts, Tommy Stoffel. I'll introduce David McLeod, my partner in crime, in a moment. This week, we're going to talk about an illuminating topic. Kind of like when you walk into a room, and a dark room, and you flip on the light switch, and it no longer becomes dark. We're talking about illuminating your shadow. So David is our resident shadow expert, and we're going to rely on David's expertise and insights in this topic. David, hello, welcome, good day. How are you doing, man?
Good morning, Tommy. Yeah, like illuminating the shadow. That's it's a subject that's been near and dear to my heart for quite a long time. The idea is that everybody, all of us, the entire human race, we all have parts of ourselves that I like to think of it as like parts or attributes or characteristics or behaviors or aspects or something like that that we disown, disavow, deny, hide, or repress. And we do this because we have some belief that those parts of ourselves are inappropriate, unacceptable, wrong, or just plain bad. And so we try to hide them. And we generally start this when we're pretty young. We start this at a very young age. We might hear something from a parent or from an adult somewhere, that sounds criticizing, and we turn that into a personal message, and we say, oh, mommy's not happy, I better not do that anymore. Or my teacher didn't like that, I guess I'm not supposed to behave that way. So what we do is we think we're hiding those things, and we put them in the background, and we do our best to kind of cover them with other behaviors that we believe are much more acceptable or appropriate. And meanwhile, those little parts of ourselves are hanging around in the background, kind of like little kids, The way I like to describe it is, it's like, as an adult, I take my kids and I put them to bed at night, and they're just so angelic and beautiful, and oh, I love you, Daddy, and good night, and so sweet. And then I put them down and I tuck them in, and I walk out and I turn off the light. The next thing I know, those kids are out of bed, they're playing around in their room, and then some of them will climb out the window, go out the door, play around at the neighbor's house, dig up the lawn, ruin their plants, maybe toss toilet paper up in their trees, and come back to bed as if nothing happened. But of course, the next day, the neighbors are coming over to me and say, hey, your kids were out on my lawn. I'm looking, I said, my kids? No way, my kids are angels. So that's kind of what happens, these shadows get in the background, and they act out. They act out in our unconscious. So that's kind of the way I like to describe it.
While your shadow kids are TP in the neighbor's house, in my mind, I'm on a ship, an old sailing ship, and the captain's gone to sleep, sleeping in the big bunk in the back, and all the crew members become pirates and drink all their rum and get rowdy and just wreak havoc and break sails and break masts and do all this crazy stuff. It's like that, and if we ignore them, right? If we don't train them to do their jobs, if we don't show them that it's how to behave or how to kind of shift the energy of that energy in us, then it plays out in ridiculously weird behaviors, in ridiculously weird ways. Everything from playing little energy games and pushing buttons with people to just full out rage, anger, murder, suicide, ridiculous things, right?
Yeah.
So illuminating the shadow, man. What happens to a shadow when you illuminate it?
Well, before we illuminate it, let's just talk a little bit more about. First off, shadow behavior, by its very nature, tends to be unconscious. Yeah. It's something that, because we have put it back in the background, we may have pushed it back in the background in a conscious way, because we were trying to get approval or love or not have mommy or daddy angry with us or something like that. We had a really good reason for doing it in the first instance, and it may have even worked. We may have found a way to show up in a way that maybe it kept us safe in some way, because since we weren't showing that behavior, we didn't get spanked or beaten or maybe criticized or whatever happened in our lives. That's what we did. We did it to keep ourselves safe. So the first thing I want to do is I want people to understand that there's nothing wrong with this. Okay? We all do it, and we all do it for what I believe is a pretty good reason. So for the first, let's just talk about honoring ourselves first before we try and make ourselves wrong for having shadows. That's the first thing I want to do.
Yeah, and right on, and I'll say that and twist it a little bit differently too. We all have these behaviors. We all have things that we don't like about ourselves until we don't anymore. We all have, as some people call them, a head full of delusions. We say one thing one day, we say something the other day, we act one way one morning, and later in the afternoon we're like screaming our heads off and being nutty. And it's not our fault, right? We were born into this rat race. We were born into this society that kind of teaches us these behaviors, or we kind of fall into these traps of things like you said. It made me safe in the past. It kept me out of trouble. It kept me not getting an F on my report card. It kept me not going to detention in the principal's office, right? We get these behaviors right, and they settle in. So we're not bad people.
That's right.
I sometimes go like this, and I hold up and I hold up, and I'm at. Has anybody ever really held a bad baby?
Yeah, good point.
Really?
Yeah.
And that is still you. That bright, brilliant, beautiful, loving, giggling energy is in every one of us, and so that's what I honor. I honor that I know that's in me, and I just need to work on getting the nonsense out.
That's right.
And,
yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally resonate with that. And I mean, the thing is, I know I can. This is a true story for me, that I can remember times in my life when I have done things, and not that unrecently, by the way. I still finally find myself doing this from time to time. And that is, I find myself caught up in some drama, probably of my own creation, in which I am behaving in a certain way, and when I was younger, before I became aware of this kind of pattern, it would just happen, and then later on I would look back and say, what the hell was that? Where did that come from? That's not me. Somebody kind of came and possessed me. And that's almost exactly what it's like. When the shadow takes over, it's almost like possession. You know? And it feels like there's a demon that's come out, and you think, oh my God, where did that come from? Have you ever had that experience, Tommy?
Uh-huh.
I'll take that as a yes.
And you know where it still comes out? When I'm driving down the freaking highway.
Yeah.
When I'm in that nutshell, I call a car, the nut comes out, and it's still like, somebody's going too slow. How dare you go so slow? You're right up on their bumper. You think that's going to make them go faster. You toot your horn. You show them one of your appendages. It happens, all right?
What, you mean to say you stick your leg out the window?
Uh-huh.
So we all do it. We all do it. And I know there are going to be plenty of people out there, and I've had this happen where people say, I don't do that. And, I think, sometimes it's hard to admit. It's hard to admit. I get that. I don't want to admit that I behave that way. It's uncomfortable. It's unpleasant, and it's painful sometimes to admit that I don't always show up as the amazing, enlightened person that I would really like you to believe that I am. I have my flaws. I have my weaknesses, and sometimes those little parts of me that were missing love in the early stages of my life, that somehow got the idea that they were bad, sometimes they come out and say, hey, I just want some attention. I want some love. That's really what's going on here.
Yeah, and before you get too far away from it, some people who say, oh, I don't do that. I don't act out.
Mm-hmm.
I know a few people like that, and I read their books, and I follow their teachings because they're enlightened. But everyone else, until they get there, does it. And if you don't do it outwardly, then guess what's happening? It's like you're in a big metal tank and you shot a gun inside, and that bullet's just ricocheting around inside you. It's causing internal damage. It's causing internal stress. It's causing internal harm because we're keeping it bottled up.
Right.
Now you got the pot on the stove with a lid on it that's tight, a pressure cooker without a release valve, and you've got the heat on high. It happens. It builds up pressure inside of ourselves, and we get sick. We get internally depressed. We get you can. Just because you don't act it out doesn't mean it's not happening. So just different ways to recognize it, right?
Yeah. Sarah Jane just offered a great comment here. She says, we're all born perfect. It's what happens and what is said to you that affects you, and then you change to fit in. Change in quotes, and then fit in quotes. That's very true. I think that's precisely what we're talking about here. It's just that the process of change to fit in means sometimes casting aside parts of ourselves that we just made this judgment. That part of me is not a good part. I don't want people to see that part, and so we try to hide it. But the problem is, now this is something that I teach people as well, is so imagine you got this big source of light up here, and you've got this little object that you're trying to, and it's like a mask. It's casting a shadow on the ground behind it. Well, I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but the further away this thing is from the ground, the bigger the shadow it creates. Correct? And so what it's really doing is it not only masks the thing you're trying to hide, but it also masks a lot of other stuff that's in close proximity to that thing you're trying to hide. And some of those things that you're trying that get accidentally covered may be really beautiful, powerful, wonderful things about yourself that you're also hiding because you're trying to hide that one tiny little piece that you don't like so much. It's very, well, it's you don't even know that you're doing this. That's the point I'm trying to make.
It's very, very deceiving, and we don't even know it's happening.
Yeah.
My friend Marjan says it's a problem disguised as a solution.
Mm-hmm.
But even sometimes I'm thinking like aspects of myself that get hidden, or good aspects of myself that get hidden. How about the honest part of yourself? How about the truthful part of yourself, the open, integrity-full, authentic part of yourself? That I'll just tell a little white lie so I don't get in trouble this time. I'll fib a little bit so I don't hurt their feelings, and that now you're creating. I don't know if that's considered a shadow, but that to me is one of those things that you're hiding an amazing quality of yourself.
Yep.
And
I think that's actually a really good point, because in fact, if you think about this for a minute, if I hide any aspect of myself, whether it truly is good, bad, appropriate, or acceptable or not, I'm actually lying, because I'm not sharing the whole truth of who I am.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you brought that up. To hide any part of myself is to lie in some way. To withhold the truth of who I am is to lie. So am I in integrity when I hide any part of myself? We talk, not you and I necessarily, but society in general. I hear people talking a lot about valuing authenticity. Mm-hmm. And yet, when somebody gets angry and expresses their anger in public, isn't that authentic? And yet somehow we make it wrong, Or if a little boy starts crying because he's upset about something, and one of his parents says, "Hey, big boys don't cry," trying to stop him, aren't we in a way stopping him from being authentic? I think there's a huge danger in this, and I think part of what you and I are here to do is to help people be authentic no matter what's going on in their lives. We've already talked in 2 or 3 episodes back about you can't think your feelings, you have to feel them. And feeling them doesn't mean expressing them in a way that hurts somebody else. You can do it in a way that releases the energy from you healthily.
So let's go there, because when you and I talk about especially anger, I have a fundamental kind of disagreement with that whole concept, and here's where it comes from. Bright, beautiful baby, beautiful, enlightened being that you are within yourself, and over time, as Sarah Jane said, we kind of get thoughts and beliefs and and change happens to us. Some people say we get conditioned to behave and act certain ways, and some of that conditioning takes on this form of shadows and thoughts that maybe aren't good for us, and some people call them delusions. So there's this kind of this bucket of stuff inside of ourselves that causes us to maybe act out, and it is important, I think, to act out in a positive way as best you can, or a neutral way. When we act out in a negative way, it impacts not only us, but it impacts the world around us. So if there's anger coming up, then there's still something hiding in us. There's still something hiding in there that we haven't faced or haven't addressed. That's the kind of the root cause of that anger. And I understand we don't want to keep it bottled up, right? Because that hurts us. That's shooting the bullet off in the can and it ricocheting around. But somehow we've got to get back down and find out, if you have something inside of ourselves, we've got to recognize it, we've got to reduce it, we've got to get rid of it. And ultimately that's the work we're doing, right? Bit by bit by bit.
Yeah. Well, obviously you and I have agreed to disagree on this topic. And I personally believe that there's no such thing as a bad emotion, no matter what kind of energy we might have about it. And I also believe that there's only 4 fundamental emotions, and they are sadness, anger, fear, and joy. Now, when I talk about emotion, I'm talking about what we feel as human beings. I'm not necessarily talking about the spiritual concept of love versus fear, of those dual polarities. I'm just talking about emotional energy. And from my perspective, I actually love anger, because anger is the energy of action. It's the energy of passion. It's that energy that gets me moving in the morning. All anger doesn't have to be bad. All anger doesn't have to be in the form of rage or anything like that. Not all anger is necessarily related to the I'm not getting what I want kind of thing, and so I have to do something to change that. I think anger is just saying there's a change I want to make, and I see the direction I have to go in. And anger helps me to stay focused too, by the way. So I think it's sad that the word anger has so much negative energy associated with it, when in my judgment, it's just a word that describes a form of emotional energy. Yeah, we can take it too far. Yeah, anger can do a lot of damage, but so can sadness. If I overdo the sadness piece, I can become deeply depressed. I can actually damage myself severely by staying caught up in my sadness. Same thing with fear. If I allow fear to overtake my life, well, I mean, all we have to do is look around in the world today and see what fear is doing to the world. So I want to stay more connected to my joy, absolutely, and I'm not going to be afraid to step into my anger when I need to. So.
Yep. All right. We'll have to have another show on this, because that you only have one what I consider a positive emotion and 3 what I would call red or down arrows or have negative connotations to them. That's heavy, and we're carrying that burden around, and it evolves into what we do and our thoughts and our actions and our results, and whether we believe it or not, or whether you subscribe to it or not. We give what we get what we give. Karma is a fact of life, and if we're energetically thinking and feeling in sadness, then that's law of attraction too. That's what we're going to get back. If we're thinking
so there's
and
another point
fear,
that you
that's
just
what we're going to get back.
Yeah, I just want to come back to this too. You and I also have a fundamental disagreement about the notion of positive and negative. I mean, I don't think any of these emotions are either positive or negative. I think that they all have their purpose. They all, I mean, there have been times, as a result of my own shadows building up and trying to hide parts of myself, I hid almost everything of my emotion. The only emotion that was ever safe for me to express, it seemed, was anger, because that's what was expressed by the rest of my family. So my joy got shut down. My sadness got shut down. Even my fear wasn't acceptable. So in the process of doing that, I shut down a huge part of myself. And when I was able to regain connection to my sadness and actually feel grief in my body and feel it passing through, and just the release that came from that, that brought me back into my joy. That brought me wholeheartedly back into a great deal of gratitude and appreciation. And I mean, I'm very, very glad that I was able to do that, because it helped me to stay connected to my joy. Joy.
Totally agree.
Yeah, I agree with you that, you know, it seems sometimes that these energies may be negative, and I get where you're coming from on that. But I just want to say that every one of them, no matter what's going on, has its own place, has a positive aspect and a negative aspect. And I personally try to eliminate words like positive and negative from my vocabulary, just because what's positive to me may be negative to you, and vice versa.
All right, I'll shift my terminology a bit, and I'll talk about vibrating energy levels. You know, we're in this mode where we're shifting as a planet, and people are shifting, and we're vibrating at higher and higher frequencies of energy, because we're letting go of the heaviness, of the heavier emotions, of the heavier weights, of the heavier anchors. And as we do that, we'll naturally vibrate and be lighter and brighter, and eventually more enlightened. And so there's also an aspect of yes, they serve a purpose to recognize and to get away from things, but at some point we need to really start cutting the chains too, and really let that balloon fly. So
say more about that. I'm not quite sure I follow your metaphor.
Okay, let's get into shadow. Let's talk about, because we're here to illuminate the shadow. So let's go.
It's all part of the same conversation, Tommy. I think it's all good stuff. I got another comment here from Sarah. There are over 600 negative words in the English dictionary and less than 200 positive. That's an interesting statistic. I haven't actually checked that myself, so I don't know, how accurate that is. But I do remember, in relation to that comment, there was an experiment that was done, I think in the 50s or the 60s, where some psychologists were following a bunch of kindergarten students around for like a year or something like that, just trying to understand how they're impacted by the words that are said to them and so forth. And one of the things they observed in that experiment was, by some metric, I don't know exactly how they came to this, these children were receiving messages with a negative undertone to them on a ratio of about 10 to 1 to the positive. And the real question that comes up is, well, why is that? And I think that part of the answer has to do with we generally don't complain when we're happy. But we don't go out of our way necessarily to say how happy we are, or to give thanks or appreciation, when things are just going the way we want them to go. It's not until we're not happy that we start to complain, and that's where I think it shifts. Now, this might have something to do with the ego mind, it might have something to do with shadow, I don't know, but it seems to be a common behavior amongst human beings. Wouldn't you agree with that?
I totally would. Let me see if I can bring this up real fast. And I'm not sure if it's going to come up, but I was actually at a Super Bowl party, and there was a 2.5-year-old running around, and the mom said, or maybe it was a 1-year-old, and she goes, oh, the first words out of her mouth were mine, give me, and no. And so yeah, absolutely, that's kind of the societal magnet, the societal pull that we're trying to help people break free from. And yeah, it's all around us, and which is why we did Life Works or Life Matters 360, to say we've got to counterbalance what we're surrounded with all the time, to keep strengthening our inner muscles of being more lighter, freer, happier. I won't say that's positive. I'll say it's lighter, freer, and happier. Mm-hmm. And in order to do that, we need to cut away and look for, and surgically in some cases remove, some of the heaviness, some of the darkness, some of the weights.
And of course, one of the first things we can do in order to do that is to become aware of it. And that's really what illuminating the shadow is all about, is first off, recognizing, and not only recognizing, but being willing to admit when we are caught up in some drama that we may have been trying to hide in the past. some part of ourselves that we're trying to prevent other people from seeing. And yet that part of ourselves seems to show up sideways in a variety of ways in our life, and it has an impact. It has an impact on the people around us. And it's after the fact that we look back and say, oh, damn, now I got to go and apologize to everybody. I got to, oh, man, this is so embarrassing. I feel like, you know, I just really am so ashamed of myself. And you notice now we start piling on even more messages, which make it even more wrong than it was before. So I guess what I would like people to do is just take a moment and sit and relax and just notice. By yourself. Do this by yourself. Sit and relax and notice, how do I show up sometimes from my shadow? How do I allow those parts of myself that are just craving some attention to come out and take over my life? And when they do that, what's my response to them? Am I trying to shut them down again? Here's what I'm suggesting. I think that if we can just say, here's a part of myself that is hurting. Here's a part of myself that I cast aside when I was 3 years old, 4 years old, 5 years old, whatever. And I haven't ever reconnected with that part of myself. Here's a part of myself that just wants some love. Can I love this part of myself unconditionally? And if I can, then maybe what I can do is I can take that behavior and shift it so that it does something useful for my life, rather than sabotaging things on me, tripping me up, and preventing me from showing up as a whole person that I really want to be. That's what this is about. This is about bringing awareness, shining a light on it, getting some understanding about what that part's wanting, bring some love to that part, some healing, and then integrate it back in, acknowledge it. Now, is it going to stop showing up and stop misbehaving? Probably not. You might have to do this a few times. You might have to do it 100 times. You might have to do it 1,000 times. But one thing is for sure, each time you do it, the energy of this part as it acts out is going to get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, and you're going to be more and more integrated, more whole. And that's what this is really all about.
Yes, it is. And I want to kind of interject one little step between 3 and 4, or 4 and 5 in there, of becoming aware of it and looking at it and understanding it and bringing it light. And there's a great metaphor for light, right? I gave it quick in the beginning. You walk into a dark room, and if you walk into a dark room and you don't know what's in there, you haven't been in this room before, it could be full of sharp table edges and nasty things that you'll stub your ankles on, or your shins on, or you'll bounce your face into. Click on the light. You bring the light in, and there might still be scary stuff in there. There might be a room full of, I don't know, mines or bombs or something goofy, but now you see them. And that's exactly what you're talking about. And you bring in the love into that situation. And now I would ask you at that point to say, before you just reintegrate whatever part of yourself that was that you were neglecting or that you have identified, before you reintegrate it in, ask yourself, what good does this do me? What good is this? Is this something I want to bring into my life? Or is it something I want to recognize that is a part of me that was good at that time? Is it any longer true? Right? It comes back to that question, is it true? Do I need that part with me? And then decide at that point to reintegrate it. Or maybe that's one that you let go and say, you know what, I don't need that behavior anymore. I don't need that fear. I don't need that safety mechanism. Maybe I don't need what I used to need as a younger person.
Yeah.
So
no,
just that little filter in there. But then integrate, love it, bring the light in. That is the magic of it.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. And one of the things that I have found useful for myself when I'm doing this work is I actually have a little conversation with that little part of myself. And I like your reminder about what is the good that I was trying to create with that. And that's beautiful, because ultimately I think everything comes from a desire to give or receive love. I think ultimately everything that we do comes from that, even if it's so dysfunctional that it looks like the exact opposite of that. So my question would be, so what good am I trying to create with this behavior? And find a way, a different way, a new way to create that good that doesn't also create the dysfunctional behavior. And then, encourage that small part to keep bringing that good thing, and let's find a new way to do it. It's like talking to a small child. The problem was when I cast that part aside from me when I was little, I was an underdeveloped being at the time, and I really didn't know anything about parenting. But now I've had many years to live my life, and I'm a much more open and unconditionally loving parent than I ever was when I was 5 or 6 years old, and I cast that part away. So now I can say things like, I see you're trying to create this, and I see you're scared. There's no need for scared now because I'm here to support you. I know exactly what you're going through. I can help you. So you can count on me as the adult. I have the powers now. So that's really what we're talking about, is illuminating, healing, loving, and integrating. And I think that's really what it's about. And I hope people will take this to heart and look at those parts with love, with unconditional love, and bring them back in. So, Tommy, what are we going to do next week?
Next week, we're going to talk about awareness, which you already kind of laid the groundwork for. The first step in that is to become aware of something. And we're having a very special guest with us, and she's an acquaintance of yours. Tell us about next week's guest.
Yeah, well, we've invited this amazing woman. Her name is Lina Orlando. She's from the West Coast someplace. She may live in Florida. I don't remember. But anyway, she's been doing this work on the power of awareness for a long time, and she's got an amazing story of her own to share. And her process is really about what we get when we raise our awareness, when we become aware of the things that are going on in our lives. So Lina is going to join us next week. We're going to have an amazing discussion about this whole subject, and I'm really looking forward to it.
All right. Well, thanks, David. Thanks today, and thanks everybody for joining. Love you lots. We'll see you next time.
All right. Bye-bye, everybody. Thanks for being with us. Bye-bye.